when people use and think about themselves, they then use the children as pawns instead of thinking about, okay, what's in the best interest of my children and how can I get through this process to make sure that they're on the forefront.
There comes a time in man's life he has to fight his demons, change his perspective, leave behind the life of lies and scheming. When your family's at stake, there's no impunity. Every choice he makes can trickle down to his community. Building foundations from hard work and patience. These are the lessons we'll be passing down for generations. A place where men won't just accept their fate quietly. Welcome to the modern dad society.
You're listening to My Dad, DeShazer. Welcome to the society. Bye.
Welcome back to the Modern Dad Society podcast. We understand that our children learn from our actions, not just our words. We believe in personal development, highlighting the powerful influence of staying present and making conscious choices and shaping our lives and the legacy we pass down to the next generation. I am your host, DeShazer, and like always, take a deep breath in, hold it, and exhale, being present in this very moment with gratitude in your soul and love in your heart. Thank you so much for joining me today. Like always, I'm so excited, especially when I have guests, just because there's so much information that is going to be shared a lot of times above what I know. And in this instance, it's definitely more than what I know. And so I'm honored to be here today with our guests. If you have not already, just remember that the 7 Laws of the Modern Dad ebook is out. You can go to the website, www.themoderndadSociety.com, and you can order the ebook there. I focus on education and community. That is what the Modern Dad Society is all about. Fathers need community. I needed community when I didn't have one, and I had to learn a lot of things on my own through trials and error. So it's nice to be able to provide that to other fathers. So you want to join the community, join everything that I have to offer when it comes to education, and let your life be transformed through it. So today, we're going to dive into a topic that affects many families, but is also surrounded by uncertainty and emotions. And so this is family law. And, whether you're navigating the challenges of divorce, figuring out custody arrangements, or just want to be prepared for the unexpected, understanding the legal landscape is crucial. And so to help us unpack these important issues, I'm excited to be joined with Deonee Easton, a seasoned attorney licensed in Texas and Massachusetts, bringing a unique perspective to family law with a solid background in social work. Deonee graduated from Michigan State University College of Law and honed her litigation skills and passion for client advocacy while competing in the American Bar Association arbitration competition. Her leadership as a brief writer and team captain helped MSU Law achieve regional and national finalists, standing for 2 consecutive seasons. Before attending law school, Deonee worked as a social worker for the Department of Children and Family in Arizona and Massachusetts, where she skillfully navigated the system's complexities to promote permanency and enhance family protective capabilities. Her experience in assessing, evaluating, and managing service for abused and neglected children adds a compassionate and informed approach to her legal practice. So, throughout her legal career, Deonee has explored various areas of law, but has found her true passion in family law, estate planning, and probate. So her extensive knowledge and experience make her a valuable guide for clients seeking favorable outcomes in these areas. Deonee holds a BA from George Washington University and a JD from Michigan State University. So, without further ado, welcome Deonee to the show. I appreciate you being here.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction.
Thank you so much. With the help of you, of course. I see a lot of podcasters who memorize this stuff, and I want to get to that level where I'm memorizing these, or maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe they just know how to hide it, but
you'll get there.
Yeah.
You'll get there.
So before we go forward, one thing I like to do is I want people to get to know you as a person, because I know when we're in careers, we wear many hats. And I know you're a mom, you're also an attorney. And so I want to get to know you more on a personal level.
Of course.
For example, your family and hobbies. What do you do outside of your career?
Okay. Well, I am a bonus mom to my two wonderful little stepchildren. They're amazing. I have a amazing husband that is down here in Texas with me. We kind of had a
That's
whole
good.
trajectory of life
Yeah.
of how we got here. But, you know, I came from my parents. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, and we were a very, very tight-knit group. And I kind of learned a lot of my values and my morals in my family unit. So I'm grateful for my family. In terms of hobbies, I actually used to be a little bit more active before I became a practicing attorney, if I'm being totally real with you, because I danced for over 20 plus years. I did tap dancing and jazz, and I did a little bit of gymnastics until I couldn't tumble anymore because I couldn't bend that way anymore. So that became a problem, right? But I enjoy playing badminton now with my husband. I enjoy going to the movies. I spend a lot of good times with my friends, and I love to laugh. That is one of the biggest key things. And I know it's technically not a hobby, but I make it a hobby, right? Because the family law field is so complex and it's so crazy sometimes. I just have to laugh every other time.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a holistic form of medicine too.
Absolutely.
You know, to put you in the right state of mind. So that's
Absolutely.
awesome. And so you said, how many kids do you have?
Two.
And what's their ages?
My son is 12 and my daughter is 11.
In your household, do you find it, people are afraid to argue with you because
I wish.
yeah. Oh.
My husband likes to argue with me all the time. Are you kidding? No.
Yeah.
But I mean, he holds his own, right? We make each other better. So when he tries to challenge me, it makes me a better attorney when I go to work. So
Okay.
it's great. It's great.
Yeah, no, that's cool. My wife and I, we coached marriages for a while, and we had to set boundaries with ourselves where we're not going to coach each other when we're having a disagreement, because it's that's not fair, right? We gotta treat each other like couples and not like clients. And even with the Modern Dad Society, I try to make sure that I'm not always trying to educate my kids. And I know it sounds interesting, but I know sometimes it's easy to critique their every move just because that's what I do. So sometimes they may say something, and if it sounds off, I'll let it go, just because I don't want to get in that habit of saying, this is how you should do it and yada yada, Right. So it's definitely a boundary that has to be set when you're in certain career fields. And
Absolutely. I mean, we try to set it, and he tries, and I have to remind myself that I'm not speaking to a potential client. I'm speaking to my husband. So I have to kind of turn that hat off sometimes. And a lot of times I let him have a little bit of grace, and I'll let him win a little bit. Yeah,
I know that's what y'all do. Y'all let us win so we can feel good about ourselves. No, we appreciate that. So all the women in the world, we appreciate that, makes us feel good. So that's cool. So in regards to social work, what motivated you to actually transition? How was that social work, and how did you, how was that transition for you from that career to being an attorney?
So it's interesting because I didn't have a very direct path to get from being a social worker to an attorney, or even knowing what my career trajectory was going to be, right? So when I graduated from college, I told myself, I'm just going to apply to a bunch of different jobs. I was in the time of when there were no jobs out there, because I graduated in 2013.
Right.
And so I applied everywhere in the country, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to take the first job. I'm going to be experimental. I'll take a dive. And ironically, the first job I had was being a social worker in Arizona, and I was in a child abuse, sexual abuse unit, which is a very heightened abuse that children are going through. And I was a very, very young person being in a unit like that.
Wow.
And it really, really changed me. I learned a lot about vicarious trauma and what that was, because I didn't understand. I mean, here I am living my life thinking everything is normal because I'm kind of I've been in a bubble, right? So when I became a social worker, my eyes opened up in a way that I've never experienced. And I found myself really, really, really angry all of the time, because all of these kiddos needed help. They were being abused, sexually abused, and a lot of times when there's sexual abuse, there's a lot more layers involved, right? It's not just sexual abuse, it's physical abuse. It could be neglect. There's layers, right? There's mental abuse. So I was so frustrated with myself in that system, because I was doing everything that I could outside of the courtroom, and in the courtroom I couldn't speak. I had to have an attorney speak for me. And I would be in all of my court cases, and I would be writing questions down, asking people, can you do this? Can you do this? Let's talk about this. Or can you ask this question? And the attorneys used to get so mad at me. They used to get so mad at me because they were like, why are you doing this? And I felt like a lot of the judges didn't understand the complexities that were involved with the child trauma, their emotions, because, you know, the judges are seeing cases day after day, and they're not understanding who these kids were. And I felt so connected to them because they were my responsibility, right? So it got to the point where I remember calling my parents and I said, you know, I think I might need to be a judge because I understand what's happening with these kids in a way that maybe the judges don't understand because they weren't a social worker, right? And then I realized, oh man, if I have to become a judge, that means I got to go to law school. And if I have to go to law school, that means I got to leave what I'm doing now. But that is what propelled me into becoming an attorney. So I just wanted to help, especially the kids, because the kids at the end of the day are the ones that suffer the most in a legal capacity. And they're the ones that may not necessarily have a voice. I mean, they have attorneys that are appointed for them, but sometimes the attorneys are not knowing the children or spending as much time with them the way that I wanted to. So that's how I became from leaving social work to going to seeking a career as an attorney.
Yeah. And is that where you see yourself as a judge eventually?
I'm hoping to. I have a lot of compassion.
Judge Easton.
Ooh. No, we got to add the high in there. Judge Judge Deonee Easton, because we got to add and make sure that I click.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's there's this judge that I think I showed you. Oh my gosh, I forgot his name. But it's this judge. He's a black judge, and he really truly, I follow him because I found him on TikTok. I'm gonna put him in the show notes because everyone should know this judge or follow him, just because there's good judges out there, and he truly cares about people.
Yep.
And every time he'll go live and kind of like share value with people who are on his live, like giving them the honest truth. And, you know, I love that when you have someone that is being used in the proper way, you know, by God or however you want to see it, to really help people and not just judge, you know, like it's in the name. But
absolutely. And I mean, God is the Almighty. He's the provider. And I mean, he is my source of strength. I mean, husband aside, God is first for me. So he allows me to be me so that I can do what I can to help my clients because I genuinely care. So much so it actually hurts me sometimes when things don't go according to plan. I have to tell everyone at my firm, like, please help, I need help because I care too much. But it's what propels me and helps me guide, you know, people, clients, everybody in kind of the right direction and what I think might be in their best interest, because I can see things and I can kind of cater things to that person to try and help them ultimately for their families.
Yeah, my wife was the same way when we coached, because she has a big heart to help, and because she's somewhat of an empath, she would always take some of all that pain and, you know, it would weigh on her, and I had to be the one to like help her kind of like wash it all off. And I told her, I said, in order for you to be resilient when helping people, so you're not taking too much weight, you have to radiate more love than their pain is present. Ooh, and that helps defend a lot of that negative energy you put on you. And so I appreciate your heart and not just what you do, but how you do it. Because like I always tell doctors who have good hearts too, is like, you know, I appreciate it because it's good to have people in these fields that really have a good heart to help, and not just doing things just because they're just doing it, you know?
Right.
That's cool. And so this episode is very important to me. You know, I'm in a bunch of dad groups on Facebook, and preferably the single dad groups have the biggest challenges and the most questions when it comes to legal aspects and stuff like that. And so when you look at divorce procedures and relationship challenges, I do have some questions that I definitely want to address.
Okay.
My first question is, what are the most common misconceptions about the divorce process that you have encountered in your practice?
Well, the number one thing that I can think of off the top of my head is that people think that the divorce is going to happen quickly. We have no control over the timing and how quickly a divorce can go, right? So there's a lot of steps that have to happen to get to the place of getting that final divorce decree. And a lot of people believe that, especially if they agree on everything, that it's going to happen very quickly. But there's a time frame. There's a waiting period that has to occur, even if you do agree with a divorce. So I think a lot of times I want people to understand that you got to give your attorneys grace. I mean, they're working as quickly as they can to help get you through the divorce process. But a lot of the common misconceptions, at least not one of them, is that it's going to be quick. It's not. Another one is people don't realize that it can be very expensive, right? People are like, oh, I can do this. We came up with this agreement. It'll be A, B, C, X, Y, Z. This is the amount of money I want to pay, and that's it. But the more people fight, the more that it costs. And people do not understand that that is an idea that they kind of have to sway from, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are going to be fighting for custody of your children, there's emotion behind that. So it's going to cost more money because the fight is going to be a lot longer, because at the end of the day, both parents are not going to be in the same quote unquote household that they were at the time that they were together. Or even if they were in different households, it's going to be a shift because now people are putting it on paper, right? So those are two of the very big common misconceptions that I can kind of think about the divorce process that I see a lot in my practice. And I have to be very honest and very transparent. And I think setting the expectations really early helps a lot of people, because then they understand, okay, I remember Deonee said this before, like I need to kind of go back to what she talked about before. And that's a general thing that, it's good to understand before you go into a divorce process.
That makes sense. And I know I've also, was divorced at one point in my previous life. And the longer it takes, it just seems like this anxiety builds up, and we start acting out of anxiousness and fear and anger and sadness. And it's like so many emotions, because whether you want a divorce or not, it still hurts, and it affects everyone around you. And so I know a lot of couples deal with that emotional aspect of it. And in your opinion and your experience, how can couples navigate that emotional legal aspect of divorce to minimize this conflict of stress, especially when you're thinking about the children being involved as well?
I mean, that's a really hard question for me to answer, and I'm not trying to avoid it. I think it's more so that every single person is a different person, right? Everybody has their own personality, their own emotions, how they handle stress, how they handle conflict. So, I always encourage a lot of people to try and see if they can seek therapy during a divorce process, especially because it will help you to deal with your emotions. I mean, having a huge support system definitely also helps, but there's a caveat there, right? We have to make sure that even if you have a support system, your support system is not guiding your decisions, right? Because a lot of times when you get stuck with talking about things that are happening in a divorce with your family members or your friends, their opinions might guide you in what you want to do. So I always encourage people to kind of listen to their own voice when they're going through a divorce, because they may hear things back and forth, left and right, but at the end of the day, your emotional state is going to be, it's going to be hard to navigate through, but you have to remember why you're doing it, right? Why are you going through this divorce process? What is the next step, and how is this going to impact your children, right? And I think thinking about the kids throughout the entire experience of a divorce, you will be surprised, will help people with their emotional, with their emotions, with their stress, with their anxiety, because you're not thinking about yourself, you're thinking about the children. And when you think about the children, both parents are taking themselves out of it, and it can be a streamlined process. As weird as that sounds, a lot of people don't think about that, because a lot of times when people are going through a divorce, they're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their own pain, their own anger, their own anxiety, because it becomes about, this is a me thing. But especially when kids are involved, you got to think about the kids. And if you put the kids first, it could help with your emotions, because you're thinking about the bigger picture. You're not just thinking about yourself.
Being frustrated about the situation and not thinking about them, it definitely guides our actions when it comes to that. I have, sadly, I know a lot of friends who got a divorce but had kids, and I've just seen just war, within the home and as they're splitting. And, we as adults have, created some type of resilience over that. But children in that aspect don't know what's going on. It's enough that their mommy and daddy is splitting up.
Right.
Now we got to worry about like, well, you go tell your daddy I said, well, go tell your mom I said. Like,
and that's the danger too, right? Like when parents use the children as pawns.
Yeah.
And we see it so much in divorce, and it's so toxic.
Yeah.
Because the kids are being so impacted, and you don't even realize what implications you're putting on them as young children that can kind of show up in the end of when they become adults and when they live their life and when they find their own partners. Like there's a series of events that happen, and people need to kind of think about that. But it's sad because that's when I was talking about earlier, when people use and think about themselves, they then use the children as pawns instead of thinking about, okay, what's in the best interest of my children and how can I get through this process to make sure that they're on the forefront. And having them on the forefront, obviously they have two parents in some capacity, and sometimes people don't, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what we're talking about right now. But with divorce, they have a mom and they have a dad, or they have a mom and a mom, or a dad and a dad. At the end of the day, there's two individuals who want to be in this child's life. And if you put the child first and you think about the child's best interest, right, then you're not going to use them as a pawn because you're thinking about them. You're not thinking about yourself.
Right. No, that's good. Yeah, it's my wife and I, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when we just got married, we had our issues, and, I'm so blessed to have the children that I do, because even at a young age, my oldest daughter, she's 8 now, but she told me, and, one time she goes, when we were arguing and we were separating, she said, I don't like when mommy and daddy fight. I don't like when you fight, and it really broke my heart because I didn't realize at such a young age that they're conscious enough to know that emotion. We're thinking like, oh, whatever, they'll be fine. But it really is something that embeds. It's like that movie, Inside Out.
Oh my gosh, I love that movie. Yeah. I just went and saw the second one by myself. It was
did you
great.
Really?
I
No,
sure
I love
did.
it. Yeah, no, it's definitely worth seeing. But it's so emotional. But in the movie, they talk about that core memory, and so it creates that core memory in them. And to this day, I know that she deep down remembers those emotions buried of that time, when she was younger. So, we got to be very mindful. Fathers who are listening right now, I know that somebody is going through this right now, and I know it's frustrating for, you dealing with it. And it seems like it's her fault, or everybody else's fault. And it may be true. It may be not your fault, but how we respond to it is key. That's the goal. That is the purpose, and how we respond to the challenges that are presented with us. And, I love what you said about using your child as a pawn. That it's very sad to think that we would do that. And we see it all the time on social media. Yep. And we've got to start changing that, men. So keep
men
that in
and
mind.
Women. I mean, it's both. It's not gender specific. It's when people have their emotions involved and they're thinking about the divorce and they're thinking about how hurt they are. Like sometimes it even becomes an unconscious thing, right? But it's something to be mindful about.
Yeah, definitely. And in regards to that, when we look at the idea of custody arrangements, what are some key factors that are determined in that process, and how can parents best prepare for a situation like this?
Well, I mean, I want to preface this by saying that, everybody's situation with their families are going to be different, right? So this is not going to be kind of a one size fits all thing that I'm going to say. But, the courts are thinking about the key standard that the courts look at in Texas is what's the best interest of the child, right? So in terms of the custody arrangements, they're going to use a lot of different factors. I mean, it's going to be where has the child been living? I mean, what are the relationships that the child has with both parents? I mean, I'm only like naming a couple. I mean, there's a whole list of things, but it's not specific to one person, and that's why it's hard. It's a very fluid standard that people have to kind of think about. But they look at the overall big picture. Okay, so where is the child going to school? Who are they living with? What is the relationship that they have? Is a parent trying to come into the child's life after not being in the child's life for a long time? I mean, there's a lot of different things. And I mean, for parents to best prepare, I think I will say this. I probably might get a lot of slack for it, but I'm going to say it because I'm very real. I'm
we're
very
here
honest.
for it.
I'm very transparent. I mean, when it comes to it, I feel like parents, if you are being a parent a certain type of way, and then you go through a divorce, and then all of a sudden you want to switch up and act like you're going to be a different way, it can cause a longer divorce process. It can cause a lot more strife for the kids because I'll give you an example. If a dad is trying to be a parent the entire time that he is married to his wife, and they get divorced, and then, dad says, I don't want to do it anymore. I mean, okay, then the custody arrangement is going to be very simple, right? Because mom's going to say, okay, well, I want custody, and we'll do whatever the parenting schedule, possession schedule is going to look like, right? Versus if you're not a parent while you're married and one parent is solely taking on the responsibilities, and then another parent's like, well, I want custody. Obviously, it's going to create a lot of strife, right? So there's so many factors, and that's why it's hard for me to say specifically, wholeheartedly, this is what it's going to be, because it's going to be so specific to each individual case with families.
Yeah. And I do want to make that clear too for people listening. It is case by case in a lot of situations, and I know based off the different stories, a lot of people may be aware of that. And so, I love what you share. And I also know that as a mom and also dealing with certain couples and stuff like that, you probably have seen a lot,
Yep.
And so I appreciate you answering that.
Yeah.
And, and I forgot to address, so we're on law 2 and of the 7 laws of the modern dad. And this is the second law, because I feel like it's so important that fathers are constantly actively involved in their children's life, despite of any situation that may happen. Because at the end of the day, you may not be with the mom, but you still have to be there for the children. And so I wanted to talk about this idea of co-parenting and staying active in the child's life. Again, based off of your experience and what you know as a mom and what you've seen. What would you say are some effective co-parenting strategies that can help maintain a stable environment for children post-divorce?
Okay, and this kind of ties back in a little bit with the question you asked me right before about like the best way to prepare, right? The key is communication. I mean, I had to get my voice a little deep with that one.
You can't be talking dirty on this podcast.
I know, I'm so sorry, but it's one of those things that it is the best, and people don't understand. It's the most simple thing, but it's the most profound when it comes to children and post-divorce, because you had a child with this person, whether you were married or not, right? You have to communicate. Like there's no way around it. And if you are going to be petty, if you're going to hold a grudge, if you are going to use the children as pawns, then effectively it's going to directly impact the children, regardless of however you try to spin it, right? Like there is no way of getting around it. So the best effective co-parenting strategy is to communicate, and I also think is to be open, right? Because a lot of times people get very rigid after post-divorce because they fought so long for the divorce. They spent, thousands of dollars for attorney's fees. They are depleted emotionally, mentally, physically. It's daunting. Then finally, they get the final decree of divorce, and they then are living life. What they fail to understand is that kids change. And when kids change, you have to change, because you're not always going to have the same potential rigid schedule that you had for like a standard possession order, which, we don't have to get too technical of it, but for a possession and access schedule, like as kids change, I feel like parents need to learn how to change and learn how to effectively communicate during that change. And that's a key strategy that I think will help maintain a stable environment for the kids. And try not to do the, hey, what did mommy say? Hey, what did daddy say? Because getting the kids to be in the middle creates a lot of tension for them, and then it can create an imbalanced life, and it's a little daunting. And sometimes, we as parents, we do it unconsciously, right? Like, oh, the kid will start talking and say, hey, mom, I heard what dad said over here, and you're like, oh, really? Is that what happened? Like, that's cool. But you don't want to delve deep into the other side's, personal life, because then I feel like that's where it gets a little sticky, right? And I can speak of that from personal experience. So, we have to just try to find a way to be open and communicate, be willing to change as the children change, but also try not to get too involved in the ex-partner's life. Because, the ex-partner is going to want to tell you what's happening in their lives if it's going to directly affect the children, right? Like if they bring another person into their lives and say, I'm with this person, let's talk about it. But again, communication comes right back into it. So,
fathers still have influence over their children. But the unfortunate event of a divorce, even like I said, and my wife, we actually never talk about this, but just for the sake of experience and education, when there was a time when we were having that conversation years ago, I knew in my heart that I was going to lose some of that influence and power, and I was prepared for that, and I knew that I needed to set boundaries with myself and not put extra weight on myself trying to dig into what's going on in the other home and stuff like that.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's respect for yourself too. But you think that you're respecting yourself by knowing, but you're actually disrespecting yourself by putting too much on yourself, and what you want to know and stuff. So,
and it creates so much anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Like, cause you want to protect your child. And so when you're thinking about what's happening in the other household, you can't really control it. And I think a lot of parents, especially post-divorce, when they're trying to seek a modification, they are trying to know what's happening in the other household, and not to say that it's a bad thing, because there's some circumstances where there needs to be a change. Like if we need to switch custody from one parent to another because there's something that's drastic that needs to change, or the children are going to go to a different school. I mean, there's things that are going to happen where you're going to have to know what's happening in the other household. But when you start to become all consumed about what's happening in the other household, that's where it can become really detrimental for the children and yourself.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. How do the courts typically handle situations where one parent tries to alienate the child from the other parent, and what can be done legally to prevent this? This is one of the biggest things that we see men deal with, is that, and I have a friend myself actually who hasn't seen his daughter because she just doesn't tell him where he is, just disappears and stuff. And he's the kind of person where he wants to make sure that when he does get her, he's got some things in his life that he's trying to align and get fixed and everything. Yeah. So he's not fighting it right now, but it's frustrating because this person is purposely disappearing. How do the courts typically deal with that? And is that something you can fight for?
Yes. I mean, a lot of times what the holdup for why people are not able to fix the problem of alienation is that they don't necessarily know where to go, or they don't know what to do, or they don't know what the next step is going to be, right? So a lot of times, like the courts, they just have to hear evidence and making sure you write everything down, making sure if you have communication with the other parent that you have all of the conversation in writing, because then that helps to be able to prove to the courts. I mean, the courts need evidence. They can't just say, oh, okay, well, I hear what you're saying and I hear what you're saying, because it makes it a lot harder, right? I mean, people have the opportunity to say what they want to say when it comes down to, the series of events that have occurred in their lives. But if you have, evidence of what has been happening with the alienation, so, you have text messages that show you're reaching out and saying, I want to see my child, and she's unresponsive, or he's unresponsive, or they're not responding back, or they say no, or that helps a lot more than just coming to court and say, like, she's not letting me see my kid. And when it comes down to it, done legally to prevent it, I mean, that's hard, I think, because you're dealing with another individual who you have never had any control over, right? There's just a time in your lives that you probably had a relationship and you guys could talk things out, and obviously you can't talk anymore. I think the biggest thing that people have to understand, and it's hard, but it's seek the intervention through the court system. And because I mean, you can try to do it yourself, but sometimes you'll just feel like you're spinning your wheels because you can't get anywhere, because the person obviously doesn't respect you enough to let you have the child. So if you seek an attorney, have an attorney fight the battle for you, with you, then you can go before a judge and put on your best case. I mean, I also have to preface and say that there's no guarantee that when you go to court that it's going to be exactly what you wish it to be and what you want it to be, or what you've been praying for it to be, right? It's going to be, I have to put on my best case, and I have to pray that the judge is going to see what I know, and make an informed and the best decision for the best interest of the child.
Yeah, that's good. I worked a job years ago, and the management was very bad, and I was like a supervisor, and I've always believed, and I've told my coworkers and employees or whatever, even my wife, document everything, time, be specific, because it better helps us to explain and communicate if there's a situation that arises and stuff like that. So yeah, I love that idea of making sure you document everything, because it sucks, but at the end of the day, it does seem like war sometimes in between your partner. Yeah. And the only way that I believe we can do this out of love is, like you said, like, don't sit here and try to handle this on your own. Utilize your resources. Yep. Utilize what you can do. Utilize the court system. Utilize prayer. Utilize God, because it's once we start directly getting involved at times and we're not prepared for that, that's when we start acting out and responding emotionally and everything. And so
I feel like people don't realize that when you sit in it by yourself, not to say that you should share all of your business to every single person in the world, right? But if you are open enough to have those conversations, then you might know somebody who can pass along these resources to get you to where you need to go, right? So that you can try to prevent the alienation. And I can speak from firsthand experience. I mean, you got to sometimes just go to court, whether you want to or not, whether you're afraid that it's going to hurt the child in the long run, whether you're afraid it's going to hurt your pockets in the long run. I mean, sometimes that might be your only course of action because the person that you're dealing with is not willing to deal with you. So it's just something to think about.
Cool. Another thing that I want to add to think about, this is a really big one. And I know it gives a lot of, I joke with my wife all the time. She was like, people ask like, oh, you married your wife? Why'd you marry her? Because we had a baby before we got married.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah. And so, or she got pregnant. And so I always joke and I say, well, I married her because I didn't want to pay child support. I didn't want a baby mama drama. But no, I loved my wife. I love my wife.
Yeah.
And we have a beautiful family. We've made a beautiful life for ourselves. Yeah. But I know that it's not the same for other couples. And I know there are some fathers who have that fear of what it would look like legally when it comes to child support. And so I want to kind of break that down a little bit, not necessarily directly off the question. I want you to kind of like freely talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
But in the sense of this, what are some legal protections that are available for parents and fathers really too concerned about their financial obligations, such as child support? I have here alimony, but I won't worry about that so much just because I know that this is a bigger situation when it comes to like what society says about child support, what conspiracies say about child support and all this kind of stuff. How can they navigate that landscape?
Well, this is the most loaded question I think that you have asked me thus far.
That's why it's one here under the segment.
Yeah, right.
Take your time.
It's really challenging. I mean, you want me to be real?
I want you to be real. That's what I'm here for.
The realest answer that I can say for the legal protection of not having to pay child support is don't have kids.
There you go. You heard it.
That's the realest thing you can do, right? Because if you don't have a child, then you don't have to pay child support.
Yep.
If you have a child, you're going to have to pay child support. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. It's just a matter of when is that going to start, right? Because, I mean, if you're not on the birth certificate, then you're not acknowledged as the father, then you don't have to pay child support until then you have to go through the whole paternity suit, get acknowledged as a father, and then from there they can then seek child support that way. I mean, the best thing I can also say is to make sure that you save your money, because there are child support guidelines that are here in Texas that men have to follow, and it's based on how many children you have. So I mean, the key is just to make sure that you have enough money in your bank account to be able to pay child support. I will say a very big protection that you should do is if you are voluntarily paying child support, go through the Attorney General's office, please, please, please. And the reason I say that is because if you have an agreement with the parent and you agree to pay child support and she then wants or he then wants to come back after X amount of years and say, oh, they haven't been paying, then it'll be the burden of proof on you to show that you have been paying for all of those years. And if you're not properly documenting all of your child support payments, you're in a lot of trouble, and that's where you have to find an attorney. And I can speak from firsthand experience because I actually ended up taking over a case where that happened, and he had been paying child support for, I believe it was 15 years, 17 years of,
Wow.
of child support voluntarily. And then at the 11th hour, right before the child was about to turn 18, she went to the Attorney General's office and claimed that he hasn't been paying anything. And I had to go into court and fight for everything that we could to make sure that we can get him out of it. And we ended up settling the case on the day of trial, which was beautiful, but it was a challenge and it was a lot. I mean, thankfully he had a lot of documentation, but there was a lot of years that we didn't have documentation to be able to prove it. So we had to, it's a lot. So legal protection, properly document, but honestly, I want to tell people, just pay through the Attorney General's office, pay through whatever your state allows you to pay child support, because then they will document it for you. So then if the other parent comes back and says they haven't been paying child support, well, actually, yes, they have. Here's a record of it. And we have it through the state that shows exactly what they've been paying and for how many years. So that's a very big legal protection. 17
years. I was back behind on 2 years of taxes and had a hard time finding that document. I can't imagine.
Right. It was really, really sad. It was really sad. But I mean, thankfully, you know, he had a good attitude. I mean, eventually, right. It was a really hard, you know, fight for a little bit, but came in and we did what we had to do, and we got him out of that situation. So thankfully, I mean, it was a blessing, but it was hard. And I don't want to have anybody go through anything like that at all.
Yeah. So what I hear from this is really just intentions, you know. Look, condoms are a lot cheaper than child support and sometimes free. So, you know, consider that. And if you want a membership, I mean, hey, I'm sure they got that out there too. But either way, it is that simple sometimes, you know, when you look at that, you know, like my wife, again, this is probably the only thing we joked about is like, you know, like, oh, you know, would you get me on child support if we went ways or whatever? And she says that she would never do that. That's just not in her heart to do that. Like, but because she knows me too. Yeah, I take care of my kids. I'll always take care of my kids. But at the same time, there's still that possibility for anyone to do that based off of the season they're in. And so, yeah, if you don't want that, be very intentional about who you're with, because who you're with for, you know, a few minutes or whatever can turn out for 18 years. And that right there is going to cause a lot of problems, not just for you, but for the child as well. And they don't deserve that, to come into this world where, you know, entering into war, you know? And be intentional about how you are paying the child support, right? Don't pay cash, because you can't document that, right? I'll be like, oh yeah, I paid this amount of money. We won't know that. So, I mean, put it through. What about Bitcoin? Cryptocurrency. I mean, as long as you can print it out, I guess. I mean, you just want to be able to show that you did it, right? If you decide to do voluntarily child support, if not, then, you know, a lot of parents don't even have an agreement. They'll just, whoever has a child is going to pay, and that's just what it's going to be. But this is, again, where the communication comes into play of how well and how effectively can you communicate with your co-parent, and what is that going to look like? And if you decide that you are going to do and pay child support, go through the Attorney General's office. And if you decide that you don't want to, which I wouldn't advise people to do, but if you don't want to, just make sure you can properly document it and show proof that you have been making voluntary child support payments in the event that somebody goes to court and says that you don't. You mean the courts don't take your word for it? Absolutely not. Who would have thought? The life we live. Man. That's good. And, you know, when you think about all this, you know, we're talking about the relationship of the children and that impact and everything. You know, when you look at the idea of divorce and the effect that it has on their mental health, again, in your experience of dealing with this, what are ways that as parents we can mitigate these effects, these negative effects when it comes to the long-term mental health? I mean, one big thing is, please do not talk to your children about the court process. I mean, a lot of times parents do it unconsciously, but the children are not supposed to know what happens in court. They're just not. And then the only time that they should know is if they end up having to speak to the judge to talk about what their wants and desires are after a certain age. Besides that, don't talk to them about it. I mean, the kids, the best way to go about it is to try and see if you can allow them to still be them, right? I mean, their whole world is going to be rocked through a divorce and what that looks like afterwards. So try to
try to keep things, I don't want to say the same, but think about their mental health. And I mean, putting the kids in therapy helps, keeping them in activities helps, you know, try to maintain, or at least try to keep the activities that they were doing before. So then that way their mental health won't be that drastically changed, because we already know it's going to be changed because the parents are no longer together. So finding a way to help them will help you and help them back, right?
Yeah.
So it's a circular route to take for their mental health.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that answer. My wife, I was saying that she was a paralegal in the military, so I kind of filtered these questions and then got her opinion.
She was like, "Oh, I know what to ask."
Yeah, no, she was like, you know, careful, you're not talking to a counselor. Like, and I was like, yeah, but DNA's smart. Like, I trust her opinion on it. So,
well, I mean, they call us attorneys counselors too, right? I mean, I'm not.
Do they really?
They do. I mean,
wow.
Well, in Massachusetts, when I was an attorney, they'd be like, counselor. I'm like, yes. What do you need me to say? I mean, we're not. We're not certified. I'm not putting myself out there. I'm not a therapist. I don't claim that. But it's funny with family law, especially when it comes to divorce, a lot of us as attorneys find ourselves counseling our clients through the emotional, the heart, the hurt, the psychological. It's not just about the legal strategies. It's about getting them through it and helping them find patience through it. So it's. That's why I say, you know,
that's why I felt it'd be perfect.
It's okay. It's okay. I trust you. I can answer some questions every once in a while. I mean, sometimes I don't know, but
I know it's nothing harder sometimes than to give an answer to somebody they didn't want, and you just got to watch them cry, like just cry, and you're like, oh man, do I hug them? Do I, break from? Like, do I send them out? So that's interesting.
I always have to ask people like what their boundaries are first, because I am a hugger.
Okay.
And I am. You know, I have a lot of people in my office who I'm always like, hey, I'll hug them, and they're like, but they have gotten used to me being me, right? So they're okay with it, right? So now I think it's communication. I mean, communication is key with everything.
Yeah.
People don't realize that, but I always ask my clients, are you okay if what do you need? What do you need? And, you try to find ways to help them for what they need, because if you can help them with what they need, then they can help their kids with what they need. So it's a cycle, and it's a step down ladder of kind of getting them through the divorce process so that they can be there for the kids.
And that's all you need sometimes. I mean, to tell somebody it's okay, and I understand. I mean, I was calling the doctor's office to make an appointment. They gave me 3 months out. I'm like, come on now, lady didn't care. She's like, sorry, it's all I can do for you. Like, you can at least say like, I wish I can get you in. Like,
right, or are you okay? Or
yeah, it's like, man, okay. Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. I understanding those boundaries, because I mean, it's tough. It really is. And I'm very lucky blessed that my wife and I, we decided to work it out. We didn't have to go through that. And I didn't have any kids outside of this marriage. And so, but it's a weight though. I see a lot of people dealing with this in these groups, and, that's why I'll be in these groups and I'll send them your card. Like, go talk to this person, just because like, I get it. There's so many questions that they may have that they don't have answered. And that leads to my next question. When you look at the idea of new relationships, what are some effective ways a parent can establish healthy boundaries with their partner when it comes to raising stepchildren? Because
this is right in my wheelhouse, huh?
Yeah. How would you recommend, I guess, advice for that, especially since you says in wheelhouse? And especially, again, I always say in your experience of what you dealt with, how can that be something that is dealt with in that situation? Well,
I mean, from personal experience, I'll take myself out of the equation as a lawyer, and then I'll put my advice back in. But, it took time, but my husband was very diligent about being upfront with me about him having children first and foremost, right? I think that's key, is having the open communication with your new partner about what your family life looks like. Because a lot of times people will fall for somebody and they won't really tell them what's happening, and then they find out after the fact, and then it creates a little bit of resentment, right? Like, why didn't you just tell me in the very beginning what was going on? So that's number one. But number two, when it comes to your new family lifestyle and what that looks like, it's about slowly introducing the kids. Don't dive in head first, because the kids are getting introduced to a new normal as it is. So I think finding a way to communicate with your ex-partner that, you know, I have somebody, I'm interested in introducing them. I mean, you're not putting it in their wheelhouse to say, oh yeah, no, they can't meet with the kids. But what you're doing is you're opening up that level of communication with your partner. And I feel like it creates a level of respect that you both can kind of have to try and see if you can navigate through that for the benefit of your children. Right. But I think it takes time. It takes time. I mean, thankfully, you know, my husband at the time when we were dating years ago, when he introduced me, he and, you know, his child's mother was very intentional about how I was going to be perceived eventually and kind of what my role and what my relationship was going to be. And I feel like it kind of became a natural progression with the kids. But sometimes it just takes a lot of time. I think it's just giving your new partner grace that they're walking into a new family dynamic that they're not used to. And then it's also trying to be respectful of your past partner and what that impact is going to have on the children. I think a lot of times, depending on the children's ages, it plays a key role as well. So if they're old enough to understand what's going on, I feel like you can really have those types of conversations with them at some point for why, hey, you know, I met somebody and what do you think? Or, you know, don't even have to say that this is going to be my partner. You can just slowly reintroduce them and say, this is my friend, and see kind of how they react. And when they're little, I feel like it's a little different because the sooner you introduce them, the more likely that they're going to form that bond with the new person that you're bringing into your life. And then it kind of goes up from there. And I was blessed enough to know my kids when they were 5 and 6. So I've been in their life for a little while. And so I'm bonded to them now. And I mean, they were little enough where the intention behind, you know, my husband and how he handled that was what's helped foster relationship today. And if, you know, people are going to go through a divorce and they're going to find a partner afterwards, I think it takes a lot of time, a lot of patience, and a lot of grace.
Well, I'm hearing you, and it sounds like you guys have created a good environment for this situation. And so, one father to another, Mr. Easton, respect, you know, I know it's a lot on everybody in that situation. And I always tell fathers too, in this situation, put your foot down and lay down the rules immediately. I've seen new women come into the picture and disrespect the child, not something major, but it's like if you know that you know have certain boundaries or you don't want your child to be talked a certain way, lay it down right then and there, because it won't get any better than that. It's hard enough when you're raising children, you know, to adapt with their change and your change and everybody's change and healing, let alone someone who's coming into a situation where the child is like 4, 5, 6 years old. That's a lot.
It is.
You know, I had this one, went to this little dinner thing and my kids came and the lady that invited us was cooking. And she snapped at our kids saying, you need to get out of the kitchen, yada, yada. Oh. And we're like, we don't even talk to our kids like that. My wife, first of all, I had to hold her. I'm that nonchalant guy.
She went buck, did she?
She wanted to, but out of respect for the people.
That were there, she was saying.
She was like, just know the next time this happens, we're going to have a problem. I was like, well, I appreciate it because, you know, it's just, it takes so much experience at times to figure out your relationship with a child and that child in itself. And so, lay those rules down now. Make sure that you set that standard and be willing to lose this new person so you don't lose the relationship with your child.
Right. That is key. And the other thing about it, too, is that please do not be recycling constant people in your children's lives. I mean, I know it's hard to know that, but try to be very proactive and cognizant of like who you are bringing around your kids. I mean, if you're not ready to seriously settle down and have a long-standing, healthy relationship with somebody else, don't bring them around the kids, because the kids don't need people being funneled in and out. It's just going to create and upset their mental health that who is this person and who is this person and who is this person? And then they're looking at you crazy. And then they might not have respect for you as a parent because they're like, why do you keep bringing people around us all the time if you're not that serious? Trust me, I've seen it happen a lot. So be intentional about who you bring around your kids, not just about, you know, what you said and what I said, but be intentional about it.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, oh man, you know, this is why I created what I created, because like I said, if I can do my part by providing a community of accountability for fathers, at least we can do our part in making sure, because I know this dating world is so hard these days, and it's challenging, and we want love because this is one of the most amazing pleasures we can experience. But we have a responsibility to these little ones, and whatever they see, they're going to mimic,
Exactly.
And we don't want the conversation of like, well, daddy has Cherie, Sarah, Tiffany, Tammy. Like, that's unacceptable. Don't let me find out. There's two questions I always like to ask people.
Okay.
And the first question is, what message do you want to share with the world? Based off what you do or anything that you feel in your heart. It could be about, your career, it could be anything, but what is that message in your core that you want to share with people who are trying to develop themselves and do right, like the world?
Yeah. So, man, I talk so much that it's hard to just pinpoint one message, but I think a really big one is just seek help. And I know it's a loaded statement that I just made, but if you don't understand something, ask. If you don't know where to go, find it. I mean, it's just find the resources. It pains me so much as an attorney when people end up coming to me, and if they had just sought out some resources or just talked out loud about what their problems or issues are, they could probably be guided to the next person who can help them get to where they need to go. That will kind of alleviate the pain, because I want people to be able to not be stuck in their own feelings for a long period of time, because that's where it gets dangerous, right? So please, if you are struggling emotionally, if you are angry at the world, and this is not even just about law, this is just in general, right? Like, if it pertaining to the law, if you really, really don't know where to go when it comes to where to go to seek custody, or, how can I'm going to throw some stuff out there. How can I get a will, or what can I do that's going to impact my children? Try to find like legal services, or go online, and you can even find me. I mean, even if I can't help you, I will guide you to a person that I know that can. So please just seek help. Don't sit in your own sadness. Don't seek in your own anger. Don't seek in your own emotional state, because that's where it can get really bad and really dangerous for you and your children.
I'm glad you said that. Always, like, any time I talk about this stuff in my podcast, I always tell people to seek counseling, seek professional help. I am here to be a resource, have a community, but at the same time, counselors are good ways for you to allow yourself to see your reflection, your life in a reflection. And my job is to help you, is to guide you. And so definitely want to seek help. And that's one thing, me and my wife, when we coach marriages, people always came to us. We had some couples come to us and they want to be like, do the consultation. No, I think we're good. Like, and then they come back like a month, two later when they're like in a separate home now. It's like,
right.
Don't wait till it's too late to do that. Definitely want to make sure you seek help. And of course, call DNA.
Oh yes, call me.
Of course, you have no other option. We clearly see her heart and her spirit, so you're in good hands. So make sure you do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
My last question is, I don't know if you are on social media and everything with what you do, but where can people find you to either set up a consultation or whatever it looks like? How can they find you?
Yep. Well, they can call my office, Deford Law Firm. We are in the Woodlands. My name is so unique, Deonee, that you Google me and you'll find me immediately, right?
Okay.
So you can call my office. You can send me an email. It's DNA@defordlawfirm.com. I will guide you to my team, who is fantastic, and we can set up a consultation. I am also all over social media. So you type in my name, you'll find me. My IG is Miss Legally D. It's very fitting, right? I know.
I like it though.
Very fitting.
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
I mean, if you send me a DM, I mean, I might not allow you into my page, but we can talk about things, so I can guide you and set up a consultation with you as well.
Oh, and if this is like years from now that you're hearing this podcast, you may want to search Judge DNA
Hi, Easton.
Hi, Easton.
Yes,
so
yes.
keep that in mind.
Oh,
You know,
man.
if you're not finding it that way, go ahead and add Judge in the beginning of it, and you will find her.
Oh man, that'll be so nice. I can't wait. I really can't.
Yeah. No, I'm excited for you. Like I said, we need people who actually truly care. And, you know, whether you're counselors, whether you're an attorney, whether you're a doctor, whatever the case may be, and this is what you're doing, we need people like this. So yes, I appreciate you joining me and our audience here as well, checking it out. But, you know, this has been very informative, and I really, really hope you as a father out there can listen to it again, take notes. I mean, you know, this is a huge part of not just, you know, divorce, not just your personal experience, but something you can share with somebody that may be going through it. Because maybe you're fine. Maybe you guys like me, like we got a whole home. We're not planning on divorce. That's not going to happen. No one's going anywhere. But at the same time, we all know somebody who is going through this. And so make sure you share this. This is such a huge thing. And, you know, like I said, this is law too, being actively involved, parenting after divorce. And like the biggest thing is just making sure we're present, making sure that we're minimizing as much damage as possible when it comes to our children. So thank you again. If you have not, make sure you go ahead and go to my website, themoderndadSociety.com. You can find more information out there on what we do. We also have a community called the Modern Dad Design. I don't think I told you about this.
Ooh,
but this is a money. This is a Monday morning meetup for fathers, and this is something that you know, even having somebody come on like yourself, this is all education, all support and accountability for fathers to help you have what you need throughout the week, throughout your journey of fatherhood. But this is every Monday morning at 7 a.m. And this is just a group coaching that's good for your spirit, your soul, your mind, everything. So thank you so much. This is the Modern Dad Society, and I will see you next time on our next episode. And always remember, like I always like to say here, is be conscious and stay present always. I'll see you next time on the Modern Dad Society podcast.